To BAI, to Manhattan Network again, Bernard. Really good to see you.
Oh, thanks. Same to you, and thanks for inviting me.
A lot of things are going on. We're going to try and catch up on that. And in the audience, welcome. Welcome very much to Conversation. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program for a second go-around, as it were, Bernad White. He is now billed on the graphics as the former program director at WBAI, and there's a lot going on that we're going to be talking about. And with that, I would like to introduce you once again, Bernard, and ask you if you could, maybe in a brief thumbnail way, share your own personal background and a little bit of the background, for those who aren't familiar, of the Pacifica Network and the WBAI as part of the alternate radio Pacifica Network, if you could, please. But your own background first.
I'll try and be brief.
Okay.
Born and raised in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Born in Harlem Hospital, raised in the Lincoln Projects in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Moved to Queens in the 60s, mm-hmm. and grew up there. Graduated from high school in Queens. Went to Queens College. Got a degree in administration.
Administration,
okay, yeah. And you know, always had a love for radio.
Okay.
And used to go around to various radio stations trying to get in. It was very difficult.
Trying to get in at a technical end, administrative end, programming end,
trying to get past the receptionist.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Whatever,
I understand.
Whatever happened after that.
Yeah.
But I was interested in news. I was interested in being a DJ for a while, until I realized that the DJs weren't really playing what they wanted to play. They had to play from a playlist. And
was there what they call payola going on?
There's
maybe nuanced, but
there's always payola going on. It's
right.
For instance, one of the reasons why people keep hearing the same records over and over is because record companies tell them they tell them what they want them to play, and if they don't play that, then they won't send them records.
It's an extension of the advertising industry
and extortion.
And
you know,
PR,
yeah. So that's why people hear the same records over and over.
Good to keep that in mind. Yeah.
So eventually I got an opportunity to go to WBAI, first as a guest. I was a guest there around the Clifford Glover incident. We were doing some organizing in the Queens community. Clifford Glover was a young 10-year-old boy who was shot in the back by police officer Thomas Shea.
Shot dead?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And the police officer was acquitted. We did a lot of work around that, and came down to BAI to give a report. That's when they were located on 61st Street near First Avenue. And I used to go to the Free Music Store over there, the Free Film Festival. But it wasn't until 1980 that I wound up getting the opportunity to come down and do some programming. Like now, I was unemployed then too.
Yeah.
And I had the time to go down and try and learn radio. And I spent just about every day there for a year trying to learn how to edit tape, how to do a story with a beginning, a middle, and an ending, trying to learn as much about various places in the world so I could talk intelligently about them. So
you were always intellectually curious, and there's a term, I don't know if you're familiar, autodidact. Somebody who learns because they're just curious, and there's so much to learn in terms of news or developments, public affairs, that kind of thing. And if you're really curious and you keep your antenna up and you're keeping engaged, I heard you say, I was unemployed. You could be unemployed and fully engaged with the world, but everything is filtered through that. I just thought it's worth mentioning.
Right.
But you've always been interested and intellectually curious and investigating and so forth.
And not only that, but in getting the information and trying to get it to people so that they can understand
All right, good. That's a good combo.
You know, being a conveyor or
Well, we've got you to the BAI in 1980. Now, how about BAI itself or the Pacifica Network? There's Lou Hill. Maybe it's worth bringing the viewers up to date on that.
Well, BAI was founded by a guy named Lou Hill out in Berkeley, California. He was a pacifist who went to jail for his pacifism.
Really?
And when he got out, he decided that he was going to try and start a radio station that talked about building bridges amongst and between people, trying to resolve conflict through dialogue. And he brought people together to form this entity called Pacifica.
This is coming out of the Second War. He was
coming out of the Second World War.
And that was the time when everybody was engaged in a fully patriotic, full-throated response to fascism in Europe. It's been hard to be a pacifist at that time.
Very
It's
hard.
hard to be a pacifist in the Vietnam War where things are unraveling.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Just
No, but he took a chance, and he believed that if he got allowed people who were very much interested in broadcasting to get together, then they would begin to formulate the kind of programming that the community would like, and these people would be drawn from the community.
Community itself.
Right.
Community radio.
Right, absolutely.
And was it the FM always? And
It was
what was the state of FM at that time relative to AM?
well, so few people had FM that he wound up giving people FM radios so that they could listen to it. This is in the very, very early stages of FM.
Yeah, that sounds like in the advertising industry they call something a razor. You give them a razor and you make the money on the blades that they have to keep buying, if you know what I mean. It's a term that's a generic term among advertising folks.
I always felt the same way about cameras. You know, well, I mean, they're a lot different now, but at one point you needed 35 millimeter film. So it'd be good to just give people a camera because they'll keep coming back to buy the film.
Well, there's a need to keep that kind of thought in mind because technology is moving so fast now. But he got that started, and then I guess there's 5 stations that became members of this network. It's a national network.
Right. Now it's a network. First it was KPFA in Berkeley, then KPFK in Los Angeles, then WBAI came on in 1960, then the KPFT in Houston came on, and the last one to come on was WPFW in Washington, D.C.
Can you see if you look ahead, maybe it's out of sync with what we want to talk about, that there might be others joining in that network and the network expanding if we look ahead, or is that a sidebar thing that we need not go into?
Well, it's something that needs to be considered because there certainly has been some talk about it. People have talked about, particularly people on the West Coast and in Houston, have talked about selling WBAI and using that money to buy additional radio stations.
Okay, BAI is one of the anchoring stations of that.
Well,
and you have become, you're billed now, former program director, a very responsible job at BAI, and apparently there's been a change, and you're also part of the committee to retake WBAI, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, the Take Back WBAI
So I
coalition.
think between those two things, we've got a lot to talk about.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
You know, radio goes through these ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
Folks who just come to it don't understand that, and the group that's there now doesn't seem to care. But I've been at WBAI through feast and famine periods.
Okay.
The feast periods are short, the famine periods are long, but they kind of balance themselves out.
Okay.
BAI was the cash cow at one point where it was
For the
loaning
network.
for the network. It was loaning money to all of the radio stations to keep them afloat. Now that we have gotten into a little difficulty, these new people who don't have a real history of how networks supports each other and have been guided to think in a particular way, they don't see any problem with selling WBAI.
Okay, it sounds like Carl Icahn or something, or one of the corporate raiders within the larger economy at a certain level. But I mean, that's really important, and it's worth mentioning, isn't it, that the Pacifica Network, or the 5 stations that make it up, are listener supported, so that they ask for the listeners to contribute, and I guess you can also raise funds by foundations and that sort of thing. What is the financing reality behind these 5 stations?
The reality is that we get about 80% of our money from our listeners.
Okay, that's good.
We get about 15% from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Okay.
And then the rest comes in looking for grants and trying to encourage I guess, major donors to make additional donations.
It would sound like, in terms of our grant-giving community and the community Ford foundations and whatnot and everything like that, there isn't a heck of a lot given to this public radio dissemination of alternative thinking and programming, it would seem.
Well, you know, times have changed.
Yes.
And the ideas that brought together Pacifica in 1949 were done in a different political as well as economic climate.
You're coming right into communism
and
at that time. He was.
Right. And I think that, you know, there needs to be an assessment that given the new climate, the new political and economic configurations, how might the station, how might the network be able to function within that environment and still maintain its integrity and autonomy?
Okay, and its integrity in terms of its mission.
In terms of its mission.
And its mission was, he was pacifist, but in a certain sense has come, if I'm not mistaken, set me straight, that network is thought of as being, in a generic sense, progressive.
Yes, to take positions that are anti-profit making, I'll say.
Okay, that's the thing that grounds you, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that
anti-market.
well, that's what I'm saying. We needed to take a look at the new market and just what it means, and then, you know, we make the decision that we'll stay right where we are. But there's been no real analysis of that. I think the last person who tried to bring that up and have the directors take a close look at that was the former CFO, Lonnie Hicks, who was also fired as a part of this whole purge of
this recent thing.
Yeah.
But its charge is to be a voice for progressive. That term has been associated with liberal. That term has been associated with left-wing views of the human condition and so forth. Fair to say? You don't have too many people that are rooting for the corporate owners of the economy and so forth.
Right.
Okay.
I think
you understand? There's right-wing radio. There's a lot of, for some reason. It's just interesting.
There's a lot of that, and the corporate, they are in line with the corporate, many of the corporate philosophies, so they are able to keep them on the air. I mean, you got these guys who are pretty much racist in a lot of respects.
Okay, that's important,
And that their racism gets ignored by the corporate, by corporations and by government entities, and they're able to push that venom that they spew.
The corporations seem to have what would be called a lot of money. They're making large profits, and they are representing very large, you could use the term plutocratic elements within the society that are setting the template for so many of our social institutions and even political organization. And so it's not too hard to understand that they would find ready sources of support for the programming that they're doing, which is in keeping with the interests of that relatively small plutocratic class that sets the template for our society.
Right.
The power elite, I think C. Wright Mills called it.
That kind of radio does not challenge their hegemony and their status in the world at all. It doesn't bring it into question at all. That's what we do. We try and bring it into question. We try and shed some light on what it is they're doing, how they do it, and how it affects people.
Well, then that's not going to put you in very good stead for the people who have those very large bank accounts.
Also makes it very difficult to get another job in radio.
Get another job in radio. Yeah, I'm saying there's a term, speaking truth to power, and also from an alternative perspective. So it's been a challenge all along. I would say we have the same sort of thing here in public access cable television, although there they set up an arrangement through franchising where the cable industry agreed to support public access through franchising. You don't have that.
No,
you don't have a steady source of income to give you operating or capital funds to operate a radio system like this. If the cable industry does not renege on that agreement they've made since about 1970, you can set up for this thing like cable access. There are about 30,000 stations across the country where the capital assets and the operating assets are coming from franchise payments from the industry, and they've more or less agreed to that. You don't have that within the radio system, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Excuse me. No, we don't have that. We operate pretty much hand to mouth.
Yeah. Okay.
What we get is what we need in order to survive, especially at BAI. I think some bad decisions were made. We were pretty much forced by the national office back in 1998 or so to move down to Wall Street.
That was forced? You used to be on 8th Avenue, weren't you?
Yeah, we were on 8th Avenue between on 35th Street between 8th and 9th Avenue.
What was the impetus behind forcing you to move to 120 Wall?
Well, we were looking for a place. They were not going to renew the lease.
At the place you were?
At the place we were.
Okay.
We needed more space. So they began to shop around to find the space. The person who was the executive director at that time of the Pacifica Foundation, also in real estate, and she found this place, which is a very beautiful place overlooking overlooking the river, the East Estuary. Yeah. It's not really a river, but it overlooked it, and you can see the ferries going in and out, and the Circle Line going up and down. There's a heliport over there, so it's very, very, very nice. But it also was very expensive. What happened was that we got a discounted rate for the first 5 years. In fact, the building management even helped us to with our buyout. So
this was about 98, did you say?
Yeah, about 98.
There was also a large change, and if I'm not mistaken, our Dan Coughlin, who was who's our executive director here at MNN, was then the director of Pacifica. Right. And I think Amy Goodman, who's now become a full-fledged star in terms of alternative programming, was program director, and they were let go.
No, Amy,
how did that? What was? It may be relevant because there are elements of that thing that occurred back in 98 or 99 that are perhaps relevant to what's going on now. We want to get into that. But
okay, and I'll have to get back to the being on Wall Street because that's very germane to where we are right now. Okay. Well, Amy Goodman did a morning talk show host. She was a morning talk show host at WBAI, a co-host actually. And in fact, I was the other co-host, and we did a program called Wake Up Call. Okay. She also got the opportunity because one of the things that BAI was stressing in the network is that they needed to get more people involved in doing national programming. National programming.
Okay, as opposed to just the New York market, is that it?
Well, Pacifica covered major events like in Washington, D.C., the hearings around Contra Gate, 3 Mile Island coverage, major hearings in Washington and various other places. And there was one person who was very good, by the way. His name is Larry Bensky, and he used to do all of the anchoring. And we felt that that other people should get the opportunity, other voices in Pacifica should get the opportunity to begin to do some national programming.
National? How does the national programming work?
Well, for instance, if there was impeachment hearings in Washington, D.C., we would broadcast from the impeachment hearing, put it up on the satellite, and all 5 of our stations would be able to pick it up.
So then you'd preempt the normally scheduled programming?
Right.
Okay, that's a different thing, and bespeaks a a lack of another channel where you could have been doing that and keep the that kind of thing,
yeah.
a more abundant capacity
Yeah.
to communicate, which might be coming, but that's another issue.
That might be happening in the future, but in the past, we would have these national broadcasts with some analysis.
Okay.
Where, we would bring in some experts and they would begin to do an analysis on the spot of what it is that was occurring at that particular time, and also making projections on what this might mean for the future.
Okay, and I would ask, how was that decision made? Was it made where is the Board of Trustees or the decision making for the network housed? Is there a board of directors, and is that where the decision-making capability or power is lodged, or just for a sidebar, maybe?
No, the decision-making for that kind of thing primarily came from joint discussions between the program directors of all of the radio stations,
Okay,
the program
it was cooperative,
directors,
right?
as well as the station managers.
Yeah, and it was cooperative.
Yeah.
And it was sort of fraternal.
Well, that's how it was then.
What happened in '99 when Dan was let go? I understand. I guess you and Amy. And
Okay.
that?
Yeah,
or is it relevant, or is it out of time?
Well, it's just relevant for the history. I mean, it's relevant if we don't spend too much time.
No, not too much, but it may be relevant to what's going on now, possibly.
Okay. Well, what happened at that particular time is that there was that the National Board of Pacifica had become dominated by people who had corporate interests over community interests.
Okay.
They saw dollar signs. They saw that BAI would be a
cash cow,
and that it would bring in a lot of money. At that time, in the market, they were talking about the sale of BAI being between $250 and $300 million. I don't think that they can get that now because there's just a lot more competition. Where people aren't listening to radio like they used to.
You're probably too young, Bernard, to remember Senator Everett Dirksen.
I remember.
Remember Evan Dirks, the Evan Charlie show? And Ev Dirksen was, I think he was Illinois, and he used to have a southern twang. He'd say, looking at the federal budget, he'd say, $1 billion here and $1 billion there. It finally adds up to real money. So there was a lot of money that could be seen, and that has a tendency to influence human consciousness in a lot of circles of our society.
Yeah, they saw selling WBAI and then buying some smaller stations throughout the South.
Right.
They said that they would get another signal for BAI, but there are no signals available here for another radio station.
So there's spectrum. There's a shortage of spectrum within the FM band or something in terms of all of our markets and that kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
So it is a medium of scarcity.
Yeah. So it has a finite level of
maybe changing as things go digital.
Yeah, digital brings on a whole new set of possibilities.
Okay, same here with cable television.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But now back to the story.
Yeah, the story then, and then we got to get to the current. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Dan was he was the news director for. Well, he was a producer for Democracy Now!, which Amy transitioned into. There was a time there where she was doing both Democracy Now! And Wake Up Call. After the coup of the so-called Christmas coup, she was out of the building, and she wound up staying out of the building. So she didn't co-anchor with Wake Up Call. She just concentrated on Democracy Now!
Were you at 120 Wall by then?
Yes, we were at 120 Wall.
Okay, yeah.
And, she's been able to, she got some seed money from Pacifica, and she's been able to parlay that into a nice little
Nice. It's like an empire. I mean, she's doing great out of the John Alpert and the Firehouse, and doing great. I mean, God, my hat's off to her. And
well, and you know what happens too is that it's a clear indication of what can happen if media people can get together and be able to make media-focused decisions about what has to be done.
Okay, that's important.
Yeah,
yeah.
Because what happened as a result of the...
Rather than finance people.
Rather than
finance people have been running amok in our society over the last few years.
Well, see, the finance people need to stay over there with the finances.
Yeah, yeah.
And the creative people need to stay over here with the creation.
It's a problem in the advertising industry too. Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because once the finance people get into the creative process, then you start creating things to satisfy the finances as opposed to staying true to your
market
fundamentalism.
Fundamentalism has been in the saddle. I mean, nationally and so forth. So that's part of the context in which all this stuff's going on now.
So,
but what happened on that 99? Somehow they got reinstated and things got back on course because of the people making some effective effect on the decision-making process. What caused it to be that things were not going down, you know, a dead end that there had been signal?
What happened, as I was saying, that Dan and Amy got fired. I was the first one fired. First
on the barricade.
Right. Then Sharon Louise Harper, who was our producer, she was fired also, same day that I was fired. Because, and I think they fired us is because they knew that we would not just come back to work and just idly stand by and let them destroy the network. So they decided to take this preemptive strike and get rid of us.
They had you targeted. I have a list. Remember Mr. McCarthy?
Yeah, yeah.
And then Roy Cohen? We have a list. And
so once they had gotten rid of us, then they began to make changes. And that's what I think is going to happen in this particular case here at WBAI, and what's going right now with BAI and the Pacifica Network.
Okay, that's getting a little bit ahead. Just finish up. You were out, and then there was a change. If I understand, help me. I don't know for sure. The people actually got making demonstrations or something against it. And you were able to prevail in a certain degree in terms of keeping the flame alive. If I'm right, am I right?
Well, what happened was that every day Amy was going into work and people could hear over the radio the kind of abusive behavior that was being exhibited by some of the people who were now in Wake Up Call. She was still working with Wake Up Call at that time. And it helped us to get people to understand that something unsavory was going on, and it also helped to generate some support for the cause.
Okay, good. And it was able to be
overturned.
Went out.
It was able to.
So that's the part I wanted to get to, if I could, in a sense that was there. And now you've been program director there since then, or at BAI?
At BAI, since we had a program director by the name of Samori Marksman.
Who
died.
Oh yeah.
And I wound up taking over after he.
When would that have been?
Died. That was in '99.
99. Oh, it was right in that period. Okay, so now we're coming up.
March of '99.
Okay, now that's a lot of grounding, right, and everything. And now what's going on? You've been program director there at WBAI. And what's the date today, Bernard? It's June 5th of the year 2009. Things have been happening recently, and maybe we could ease over into that. What's been going on over these last couple of months or more, 6 months or whatever, in your terms?
Well, what's happening over the last 6 months has been a culmination of what's been happening over the last 6 years.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
There's an individual in particular, a mindset in general, that has taken it upon himself to restructure Pacifica, restructure the network. Started by focusing on WBAI and trying his best to get BAI to buckle under his demands.
Is it worth mentioning a name or not? Or would you rather not, or should it be anonymous, or is it, you said it was a trend in general.
Well, yeah, I guess you could mention his name.
Why not?
His name is Stephen Brown.
Oh, yes, I met him the other night.
Yeah. And he's a multimillionaire.
Yes.
And he see, the settlement that came about, where people, we just had an advisory board at one point.
I was there. It was really quite an education for me.
But that's a local station board.
Oh, yeah.
We used to have advisory boards where people would get on because they just wanted to help.
Sure.
There was no money involved. Yeah. They just would come and loan us their expertise to resolve issues that we had.
I think that's wonderful when you get people cooperating because that's what they want to do, not because they're a hired hand.
But the new settlement has it where the local station board has governance, that it also has influence over what happens at the station.
Okay.
So when you come up with that kind of configuration, you get people who gravitate toward that, who want to get power.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And if you have money, you can buy influence.
I've noticed. I've looked at the national organizational structure of our country, and I've noticed that seems to be very operative.
Right. So it's at WBAI now, the elections are being won, and throughout Pacifica, the elections are being won by those who have the greatest resource and not the greatest message.
Okay, that's a dialectic that's been going on since Jefferson, I think.
Right, but it's new for Pacifica.
Or maybe since Cro-Magnon cave.
Right. But it's new for Pacifica.
Yeah, okay.
And what it has caused in Pacifica right now, where there was a move to try and be as inclusive as possible at all of the various stations, where you would include members of the communities in which you work, there's now a counter movement to purge out that kind of diversity and bring it back to primarily white and primarily male.
Okay, now there's a
population.
big thing, because I was thinking, in a certain sense, the Pacifica and WBAI represents, in a certain sense, it's not a mouthpiece for the Bank of America or any of the established things. It's a mouthpiece for alternative, progressive perceptions of things, and that's a very multifaceted concept, the progressive movement. Do we have an understanding? Do we have a political philosophy that is grounding to that? Do we have an economic philosophy that's grounding to that? How do we define the multifaceted nature of what we call the progressive movement?
Well, there's a progressive...
It used to be called liberal.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
But I don't think that it's our responsibility as a radio station to do that. I think what we are is a delivery system for information that does not see light.
Okay.
For instance, to dig deep and find out why certain things are happening, and arm people with that information so that they can make intelligent decisions about their future.
Very important educational function.
Yeah. Most of the things that people endure, the negative things that they endure, I believe are based on the fact that they just don't have the information about what it is and how it is they can get from under it.
Or how things might be made better for everybody.
Right.
Rather than for a few who have managed to corral power to establish the institutional assumptions.
So in that regard, I think that's what our role is, to be that delivery system for this information, to go where the darkness is and shine some light, to go where the silence is and put our microphones so that those people can be heard.
Is it your obligation, collectively, let's say the whole movement, is your obligation to, in a certain sense, not only point light where things are not working right in terms of the expected assumptions. We have a Constitution of the United States, Human Bill of Rights, the Human Declaration of Human Rights, and we have some of these instruments and so forth, but is it your obligation to provide some alternative for the way, let's say, legislation is to be crafted, or the bills that might be to be passed, or the people that we could support that are within the system that we might support, in order to point out that, rather than just be a conduit for opposition to what's in place?
See, the alternative comes from bringing the people who have alternative ideas, bringing the people who have expertise in a particular field, who aren't being given a hearing, who aren't being allowed to the airwaves. We give them an opportunity to come and say that, hey, here's another way. Here's another way of looking at it. Here's another way of behaving around it.
And have an open book, have an open different attitude toward ideas and so on. Like we used to have this country, and it's evolving, and we used to have a Fugitive Slave Act. You had remember we used to have slavery? Slavery, chattel slavery, for crying out loud. Or remember, women couldn't vote until 1920? And if you were back there, the law is there, and if you get some slave and you don't turn that slave back into the slave owner or something, you're breaking the law, and slowly it changes and so forth. So civil rights came. And then people made a lot of misparks. Didn't sit down on that, or didn't go to the back of the bus. So a movement happens that's going to bring change, and it's going to be resisted by people who are sort of integrated in terms of the order that's being subsumed or the change that's coming. And that's where you're on the cutting edge of trying to bring that. Civil rights would be one. Women, I think women should be able to vote, don't you? Sometimes I wonder, my sister, I mean, no specifics or anything like that, but I mean, they didn't let them vote in Switzerland until I think about 1970. Women couldn't vote. What kind of nonsense is that? It certainly is not progressive, right? So you've got this progressive thing. It involves change, and it is responsible not only to point out the inappropriate order that has emerged through the historical development, but also to provide an alternative. So you understand what I'm trying to say. You have an alternative to provide you have a responsibility to provide some sort of an alternative. That would be based on things like political theory, economic theory.
Sure.
That kind of thing. And then you're going to have somebody like Ayn Rand, and you're going to have somebody like Karl Marx. You're going to have a lot of difference in there. So what I'm trying to say, it's a multifaceted thing. That it's hard to identify what among all the different inappropriate organizational assumptions of world or cultural or national society are we going to target, and how are we going to deal with them in a comprehensive way. And people are going to have different interpretations of what constitutes progress than in terms of the evolution of human affairs,
Well, I mean, we don't, we talk about housing, right?
Yeah, okay.
All we have to do is give an objective analysis, a deconstruction of the actuality of what's really happening in housing.
Okay, yeah.
And that's all we really need to do.
Okay, yeah.
And give people that information, because there's a lot of things to take them off in directions that are away from what in fact is actually happening.
Okay, well, yeah, but that's an interpretation. You're just the facts, ma'am, Sergeant Friday would say, is all we need to do. We don't have to have an interpretation political. You have to get to political assumptions, and people will have different ideas of, like a lot of women would think the main thing is you got this damn thing, patriarchy. It's men have all the power and they set all the rules, and if the women get in control, or if the women are brought into, then by God, feminism, we ought to be fighting for feminism. People who are for civil rights would have a different thing that they think is really important, that kind of thing. And how do we define it, particularly in a collectivist way that involves everybody, is what I'm getting at. How do we define what is progressive? Is it associated with any political or economic philosophy or something that can be grounding?
Well, see,
intellectually.
As I said, there are a lot of ideas that never see the light of day.
Right, they should be allowed.
And one of the chief among them is a Marxian analysis.
Marxism, yeah, that's one biggie. Yeah, it has been. Yeah.
And several other ways of viewing things. And that's what we attempt to do. Well, that's what my understanding of what we should be doing is trying to bring this information to the ear and rely on the intelligence of people to be able to take what they need and begin to move in a positive direction.
Right, okay, yeah. But do you understand what I'm trying to say? It's a multi-splendored, love is a many-splendored thing. Progressivism is a many-splendored thing with a lot of different aspects to it.
Right, and we try to explore all of the aspects.
Would you have, I think as I understand, in early Pacifica, you had people like right-wingers. Ayn Rand would be there, and intellectuals from the right as well as from the left?
Yeah.
Or is the bright left dialectic a proper one? Is there a place for the right wing or market fundamentalists in a progressive context, or is that inherently not relevant to what formulates the...
Well, I think
should we only have Noam Chomsky talking, or people that are critic of the society? Is there any place for representatives of the society that are doing things that are going to improve the lot of a lot of different people, even though it isn't hewing to a particular ideological line?
Well, that's why I said that what we need to do is have bring all the ideas to the table.
And you try to do that at BAI.
Well, some of us try to do that at BAI.
It's hard.
It's very hard because a lot of times the people who constitute the right wing don't want to come and be faced with any real challenge. They don't want to debate. Why should they debate you? They get on ABC, NBC, CBS, MSNBC, CNN all the time. Why should they spend time dealing with you? I mean, it's just going to give them a headache. They have the prestige and the privileges that they got from being on these stations. Why go to a BAI? Or
we have the same, if I may suggest, we have the same thing in public. I think there's a sister association between WBAI and public access, cable television, because here we got 4 channels, and then you got other things to take into account. The world is not all political. The world is also, I got a friend who they think people have a cure for cancer.
Yeah.
Now that's not a small matter. It isn't directly political, or other things. Or here you can show the junior high school basketball game. Doesn't have anything to do with the politics, but everything seems to be all politicized. But you understand what I'm saying? So you got many of the voices of the people aren't interested in things politics. They're interested in leading a life, and those things could be part of the communication. But we got 3,000 of these across the country, 4 channels, so you can have a great diversity of things that aren't even political.
Right.
I don't know
what
I'm saying.
I understand perfectly. I don't know how much time we have left.
We got about 28 minutes left.
Okay. Because I didn't want...
18, I'm sorry.
I didn't want us to leave here without really
good. Yeah, let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Okay.
So as I was saying, the boards now have become very competitive, particularly vulnerable to people who have a lot of monetary resources. Okay. And that's what's happened at WBAI. That the group with the most money has been able to win a majority of seats on the board. They've been able to duplicate that at other boards around. So what you have now is a national board that has this same view as the majority of the local board here at WBAI. And what they are engaged in now, although we see it at WBAI, it is not just WBAI, it is a national problem.
Thank you. I see the same,
Because what they have done, for instance, they have fired the station manager at the Los Angeles station, who's a woman, South African woman who was working there. They fired the program director at the Los Angeles stations, a Latino guy. They fired the co-anchor of the Spanish language news, a Latino guy. They fired the afternoon talk show host, Jerry Quigley, who's another African-American guy. They fired the chief financial officer of Pacifica, an African-American guy. They came to New York. They moved on Anthony Riddle.
Yes, Anthony used to be our executive.
And then they also fired me. All of these people are either Latino or African American.
Interesting.
And then they fired Don DeBar, who you'll be talking to at some point, who also who they accused of being a sympathizer.
A sympathizer of?
Of the efforts of people who are trying to explain what's going on.
Are they claiming malfeasance? Are they claiming ineptitude? Are they claiming prejudice or what?
Well, this guy, Stephen Brown, has used all kinds of devices to try and get people to think in a particular way, and he uses race, he uses accuses folks of being economic financial malfeasance.
Or incompetency.
Or he uses incompetency.
You can see it like a grader, like Carl Icahn will come in and say the board is fouled up, they've fallen behind, they're losing, the market share is going down, and all that kind of stuff. They'll come in and say, a raider will come in and take over business in the economy in general. Yeah. They'll say the board should be replaced or bought or something. Yeah.
So they come to WBAI at a time when it is going through one of those cycles of not being able to, or not raising enough money to cover its resources. They don't talk about the exorbitant expense that we have after being forced down to Wall Street. That doesn't get mentioned at all. They don't talk about the kind of destabilization program that Stephen Brown has run by sending out these fabricated emails all over the country by the thousands. They don't talk about any of that. They just talk about it's the poor programming at WBAI that isn't raising money, so we get rid of the program director.
Yeah, but it's essentially a money issue that they bring?
They use the money issue.
Yeah.
But essentially, it is a purge that is going on. They are also going to, they haven't done it yet, but by the time, in about a month or so, I would almost guarantee that they're going to remove the station manager at KPFA, who's a black woman, as well as the station manager at WPFW, who's a black male, because that's how they are moving. You can see how they're moving. I've been watching them for the last 6 years.
6 years,
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I've been trying to tell people what's going on, and it is so bizarre that people don't see it. But all you have to do is begin to take a look at some of the information, and the story is right there to be told. So there has been a coalition of organizations and individuals that have come together. They call themselves the Take Back WBAI Coalition. There's going to be a large demonstration in front of 120 Wall Street on June 17th.
June 17th. We're the 5th, so that's 12 days from now.
Right. Okay. And we need as many people to come out as possible. We need people to go up on the internet and do some of the research. There is information up there about Steve Brown. You can go to a website that says, you can Google, who is Steve Brown? And it'll come up about him and some of his business practices.
Well, I met him the other day. He's an entrepreneurial type, and I looked at his thing. He sent me a thing, and it was, it was a lot of text about the way he sees things and everything.
But, he is just a metaphor for what can happen now that these boards are governance boards, that people with money can now come into Pacifica and with a modest investment have great influence over the network. Yeah,
it happens in industry or in communications often.
Yeah, but it's not supposed to happen in WBAI. It's not supposed to happen in Pacifica.
Or it's not something that we want to have happen because it's going. We don't need another.
It is the
station of ditto.
It's people. Right. Yeah. It's the antithesis of what Pacifica is supposed to be about.
Same thing in cable, if I may, or cable television. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
They're supposed to be inclusive. They're following a policy of exclusivity. They're looking to exclude people.
Now, what are they trying to exclude? I heard you mention a bunch of people who were black, and also a lot of people that were Latino, and that's a group of people that have been very duly suffering for a long time in our society.
Not only that they're black and Latino.
Who are they supporting? Is there one of the major issues confronting our president? He just gave a talk in Cairo yesterday toward the Islamic world, is the situation as far as Israel is concerned. Israel has a very strong lobby, maybe the most powerful lobby in Washington that influences the Washington scene and so forth. Is there talk one should not in any way criticize the settlement policy in the West Bank or something along those ideological lines in terms of the political reading of things that would be bringing part of this into being, or why? What is the reason? Are they against civil rights? Are they against justice for the civil rights movement? Or I don't quite understand. Or is there? They think it's too inordinately focused by your programming, or what are they saying?
Well, what they're saying is that they want to go back.
Back to
a time when most of the people at WBAI and most of the people who were making decisions at Pacifica, virtually all of them, were white liberals.
White Anglo-Saxon Protestant male?
Right.
I'm a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant male. I like
it
the way it is now.
You may be able to get a job then.
I like James Joyce, who says, no, I don't think so. James Joyce said history is a nightmare from which I'm trying to awaken. And I also think there could be a case made for the fact that we gave the women the vote in 1920, and everything's been screwed up since, so maybe we should take the vote away from the women. And by the way, why don't we go back to chattel slavery? And you know what I mean? It's going back to that kind of a situation when the world is changing, obviously, and that kind of thing. And it seems to me we need more progressive, in the best, fullest sense of the word, of which you seem to be talking, and that's why we're here talking to you now.
I agree with you, and these folks they're not interested in that. They're interested in going back. It's going to be very difficult because they've been able to, they've been able to confuse people into thinking. For instance, here's a good example of it. The Interim Executive Director, Grace Aaron, came into New York City and spent some time at WBAI Radio. She went on a variety of different programs. She condemned our programming. In the name of what? In the same time, confessing.
Too black?
No, she condemned it by saying that it was not diverse enough, that it was not inclusive enough. That in the same paragraph, she mentions that she's not heard the programming.
Oh, that's interesting.
So she's getting the information, obviously, from someone else.
Well,
and she also said at that time that WBAI had gotten an eviction notice.
From
Wall Street, and that we were going to be kicked out of the building. The locks was going to be put in on the station, and nobody would be able to get in. And the same thing was happening at the transmitter. The transmitter rent wasn't being paid.
It's at Empire State?
At the Empire State Building, they were going to kick us out of there. Total, absolute fabrication.
Really?
That's right.
Well, I've heard that there was real trouble, and I heard you were going through a little dip in the cycle and everything, but as one does, you're a couple months behind on maintenance or something. That's happening to a lot of people now, so it maybe can be resonant with people's consciousness.
But we had never gotten...
But it's not at all correct.
We had never gotten an eviction notice. Were we behind in the rent? Yes, we were. But
I
the
fell
station
behind
manager,
a couple times in my life.
Yeah. We all did.
Have you ever fallen behind?
Yeah.
By a month or two? Okay, I'm
not
sorry.
by a month or two, but I've fallen
Have you
behind.
ever? Yeah, no, I understand.
As I was saying, these are fabrications. We never got an eviction notice. Anthony Riddle had worked out a payment plan to catch up with back rent, and we were in the process of doing that.
I heard a claim that he did not let the board know about something. Is there any truth to that?
This is what they're talking about.
Okay.
And also with the transmitter rental, he had worked out a deal on paying back rent on that, and was paying it ahead of schedule.
Really?
Right.
Well, why isn't that relevant to the decision, to what's presented?
Because you can't tell that and at the same time try and create this aura of total chaos and that everything's about to fall apart.
Right. Okay. Good. Well, that's a good context in which you could try to come in and take over.
Well,
like the barbarians at the gate.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's exactly what they did. They created that in the minds of people, and BAI listeners are very loyal.
Yeah.
When they heard that was happening, many of them stepped forward to try and help the station.
When they heard what was happening?
When they heard from Grace Aaron that we had gotten an eviction notice, that BAI is in horrible trouble, that they're going to bring in people to try and help the WBAI. They were playing on people's love of the station to achieve their real goal of purging out black, brown, and they soon will get to white also, progressive people.
Even white Anglo-Saxon Protestant heterosexuals?
That will happen to some of them.
No, even there, right? I don't know if they'll ever get to that and everything. But I mean, the point I'm saying is that the rumors that are floated in order to set up a climate wherein the barbarians can come and take over, if that's the context in which you see it, is one thing like that. But then the response by the people is something that ought to be generated up. And you say it's totally incorrect that the financial system is not nearly as dire as they're presenting. That would be a case for the ineptitude of the people who are managing and so forth, and the bad business model in their language and everything. But the people have been responding in favor of the way things are at WBAI, and it ought to be supported and shored up, and that's what would be encouraged on June 12th when you get together down.
June 17th.
June 17th.
But that's not the actual thing. The thing is that people have not been getting information because there's a gag rule on, and folks cannot come to the air and talk about it.
On WBAI now? You have different people down there and everything?
You have different people, but you also have a gag rule where they have made every attempt to intimidate people so that they will not speak on the issue. And of course,
you can always come to public access cable television.
Yeah,
and you have, thank goodness.
We have, but our listeners are on the radio.
Oh, I know, but some of them are going to be tuned in too, And this can be put on the internet, and this can be put on YouTube. It'll be up in a day or so. So there's an alternative here for an alternative kind of programming venture that ought to be supported.
But what
in my view, it seems on the surface of it.
But what we have to do is try and get the word out to people about what, in fact, has been going on. They have been led in a particular direction, and then those folks who have a different view, who have other information, they haven't been able to share that information with them.
Well, I hope you've been able to share a little bit of that here and some of the context.
Well, I hope so.
We got about a minute or two left. What last thing should you say? Do you stress again that meeting is going to be held at 120 Wall on the 17th?
The 17th.
17th, what time?
From 5 to 8 p.m.
5 to 8 p.m. So in the early evening on June, just right at the equator. That's perfect. You know, I hope we got good weather.
Oh, I'll make sure.
And are you going to make sure of the weather?
I'll make sure of that.
Okay, that's good to know and everything.
But you know, it's very important that people do come out. It's very important that people try and get as much information as you can. Go to the website, look up takebackWBAI.org. It's a new website. It's in its infancy stage, but we're constantly trying to build it up to give you as much information as possible. Look around the network. See what's happening at KPFK. Look around and see what's happening with Lonnie, former CFO. There are many people with a story to tell. They just don't have a place to tell it. And we're going to try and make that available. That's takebackWBAI.org.
Yeah, why don't we run the graphics and put them up if you can in advance a little bit and put that up, because there's a website they can go to.
Right.
And it's takeback.WBAI.org. www. They'll bring that up, but run the graphics now if you can in the closing graphics, and then leave it locked on the page so people can get it. And then there's also, that's one of the sites.
Then there's a demonstration. Oh yeah, well there's another site. Well, we'll tell you about that site when you get to BAI.org. There's also the demonstration that's going to take place on June 17th. And if you take a good look at what has in fact happened in the network, the kind of direction that the network is going, and you agree with it, then you shouldn't come to this demonstration. But if you disagree with it and you think that, that a lot of this has been race-based, that a lot of this has been smoke and mirrors and fabrications that are put up just to achieve a particular goal, and people are being misled and misinformed, then you need to come out to this meeting. I'm certain that if you begin to do the research, if you begin to take a look at what is happening around the network, you'll see that it's not BAI. BAI, they came and they created this false sense of super urgency. Then they played on that to get rid of people who they thought might object to the kinds of things that they want to do to our programming.
We have a list.
We have a
of
list.
the troublemakers. Mr.
That's
McCarthy
right.
used to say. Thank you for viewing. Bernad White, Program Director, former, but maybe again, former Director, Program Director, WBAI. Happy to bring that to you.